So started. Om Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Kratitam Purana Muninam Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Vridavarshini Bhagavati Ashtadashadhyayini Ambatvam Bhagavad Gita Bhavatveshini Namostute Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Pulla Ravindayata Patra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharata Taila Purnaha Prajvalito Jnanamaya Pradipaha Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraikapane Jnanamudraya Krishnaya Geetamrutatuhe Namaha Sarva Vasudevasutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja Aham Tva Sarva Papibhyaha Mokshayishyami Ma Shuchaha. So welcome everyone after 2 weeks of break, which we had. I know Balaji Temple had its annual day. And then last week, I was busy with this 2-week camp for the young kids from US, actually, 10 Balavihar children who came here. So towards the end, I will also show you the video of what we did and everything. But we are, as part of Bhagavad Gita, we are on the 10th chapter. And this chapter is very beautiful because it is about really seeing the great God, seeing God in everything and around us. It is the yoga of the divine glories or vibhutis. So as we've been talking about from the 7th chapter onwards, Lord Krishna has been dealing actually with this chapter on the Swarupa of Ishvara, or the nature of God. And, he has been progressively developing this theme. And as much as we can talk about the theory part of really who Ishvara is, who is God, but until we actually see God, we can never really, develop that feeling or the trust in that Almighty, right? So that is why this chapter is very, very important from that angle, is to clearly understand the nature of God. And so in our reflection time, I will just put this one with this slide that I used last week also. And this chapter being the vibhuti of yoga. And I've shown here just some of the vibhutis which exists in US. We see the Niagara Falls, we see the Grand Canyon, and we see the beauty of the mountains, say more in the area of Seattle or something. In all this, we find that we are in awe when we see this. But our mind even at that moment in time, it basically, sometimes we look at this majestic waterfall, for example, and we just wonder about it. And at actually that second where my mind is focused on that majestic fall and the mind becomes still, it is actually at that second we are in tune with that great mightiness of God. But we forget at that moment itself, something else, and some other thought immediately comes to mind, and it just takes away that awness, the awesomeness of that God. So it is all these things, actually, what you're seeing out here are expressions of God. Yeah. And we might wonder, why are all these expressions really important? These expressions are really important because it brings us as close as possible to who that God is, you know. So God, we think about as a principle, is actually invisible. But the manifestation is there in all these great wonders. Just like how we look at electricity, electricity is completely invisible. We cannot see electricity. It is a source of great power. But what happens is that great power is manifested in anything and everything our creativity can get it to manifest in the form of maybe the electrical appliances or electrical appliances or many other things. So too, this Ishvara is so powerful, just like the electricity, but it is actually invisible and actually unknown to our senses, but is manifest in this beautiful, beautiful expressions that we are seeing here. So the 10th chapter is basically all about this expression, what I call as the immanence of God. What do we mean by immanence? Immanence is basically that condition which is there, which is existing in everything. So, if you look up the definition of what immanence means something that is dwelling in or which is remaining. So it is a condition of being entirely within something, that is what immanence means. And here, God is nothing but it is entirely within everything that we see. Just as a simple example, I can think of is, in the olden days, we used to churn the milk in order to get the butter. But if I buy a gallon of milk from Myers, for example, can I really see butter in that? Not really. But the butter is there in every molecule of milk, everything. It is just pervading everything. Ultimately, I get the essence of it, and then I consume and I make ghee or whatever. So that immanence is basically, it means it's dwelling in every single thing. And so when we think about God that way, it removes from our mind this expression that, God is somebody who I can go to when I'm in trouble, So it moves beyond our relationship with God changes. No longer is God the person to whom I go to when I'm in trouble, but it is that expression of beauty, that expression of grandeur, which is residing in everything. And that is what, like, for example, when I look at this moon, which is so beautiful. And it's so, it's a nice full moon in a clear sky. And when I keep on looking at it, what happens is it just brings me down a sense of calmness, a kind of coolness within my own self, right? So this beauty of moon really attracts me. And my mind gets completely away from who I am as this ego, this self, and I focus upon this beauty. And that is what, again, this 10th chapter is talking about. This 10th chapter is all about, like I said, the beauty, the grandeur of things, and the majestic. Like, same thing with this ocean, too. This ocean really gives me that expression of, oh my God, this is beyond myself. And if I take this even further, for example, when I look at this majestic elephant, I mean, I did not put a man in front of this elephant, a human being, but in front of this majestic elephant, this human being can be, just where his foot is, just at that point, that small. In front of that, this elephant is so majestic, and then my ego really feels so small in this mighty, looking at this elephant, it just reminds me of the greatness and the power of elephant. So what do? I try to maintain some kind of a respectful distance, right? And the reason I do this because I really feel my own smallness. So that's what, again, the beauty and the glory of God is. The God manifests itself in this greatness, the beauty of so many things. And also, of course, it manifests itself in the form of ants, And looking at, of course, I'm just putting another majestic thing, which is the ocean, Look at it, oh my God, what so wonderful it is. So can I focus myself whenever I see all these things only on that majestic part of it, only on this greatness or this huge elephant? So the 10th chapter is reminding us that God is both beauty, God is grandeur, and of course, God is also the smallness in everything. But only when we see this great thing, we actually get more attracted to it, and we uh, really get enamored. We get completely engulfed in this aspect of God. So I just want us to keep that in mind as we go through this 10th chapter and reflect upon this beauty, the grandiose of who really that Ishvara is. And that is that Ishvara Swarupam that this 10th chapter is really getting into. Any questions, any thoughts to add before we just do a review of the 5 or 6 shlokas that we did last time? Anant, anything to say? Okay.
Not at this time.
Okay.
Thanks.
No problem. No problem. So, I think I should ask my mother too. My mother's on the phone. She has a video on also. But anyway, so in shloka number 1, you can see that, as Arjuna is listening to this sort of an extremely optimistic philosophy of this master, so the confused man in Arjuna now is changing slowly into somebody who is, irresistibly charmed by Krishna. And he slowly starts to develop this equipoise. And this equipoise, naturally comes to all of us as we focus more on the beauty and grandeur which is outside. So as Krishna is going to start to enumerate a lot of these descriptions, you can see that Arjuna is slowly starting to, calm down. He's already started calming down. Now he's at a state where he's really starting to admire Krishna. So this is where we saw in the first shloka, where Krishna is saying that, that now he really wants to tell Arjuna even more about his glories. And he says, Bhuya eva mahabaho, O great mighty armed Arjuna, listen to this glory of myself, listen to my supreme word. And yata te aham priyamanaya, to you who is so delighted to hear all this, I shall tell you about all this. So whenever we are, trying to gather knowledge, right? And we really want to understand the whole thing. How can we really understand everything is what Krishna is again trying to say in shloka number 2. He says, Name vidusura ganaha prabhavam na maharshayaha aham adihi devana Maharshi Nam Cha Sarvashah. So he tries to tell him, saying that, the greatness of my glory is something that even the greatest of the rishis have not fully understood this, because again, I'm way beyond name, I'm way beyond form, I'm way beyond what the organs, the sense organs can perceive and everything. So Suraganaha, those people who are endowed with a natural capacity to know the things divine. But even in those people, they fall short of grasping really the full import of who that Lord is. So, and who are they? They are the 7 Saptarishis, gone through this before. And so he says, even those people may not know, I'm the source. I'm the source for all the devas. And here devas refers to those gods who are responsible for the 5 sense organs, everything. It's because of these devas we have the sight, we have the hearing, etc. So he says, I'm even Adihi, I'm even beyond that. So we saw the 7 great rishis, which were mentioned here. So philosophically, what does it really mean? So the philosophical significance of these 7 spheres is that, so when that infinite seemingly identifies with this total intellect or Mahat in Sankhya philosophy, that total intelligence or intellect is called as Mahat. So when that infinite comes to identify with that Mahat, it develops a kind of, one might call as a smaller form or an egocentric form called the Ahankara. So many of the terminologies that we all hear in Vedanta, which is Ahankara, and then the 5 sense organs, the Tanmatras, all these actually have come from the Sankhya philosophy. So here we are saying that when the infinite seemingly identifies, in Sankhya philosophy, they would say that it identifies completely, But in Vedanta or in Advaita Vedanta, we are saying that when the infinite seemingly identifies with this Mahat, okay, it develops this egocentric personality called the Ahankara. And I guess the downfall has already started, in the sense, the second you identify with a finite or a smaller or the lower self, then what happens is automatically there is a sense of an expectation. So the Ahankara now projects itself out for gaining something for its own joys from the world of objects. And what are these world of objects? World of sense objects. These are these tanmatras. We call this tanmatras. And these tanmatras, so the Mahat, the Ahankar and the tanmatras, they actually really are these 7 rishis which are personified in the Puranas under those different names which I'm showing here, Bhrigu and etc. So these 7 rishis actually represent the intellectual or the mental life of man, and also the material causes of all creation. And this is beautifully, of course, this information I've just taken it directly from Swami Chinmayananda's book, that green book, and I thought that was so very logical the way he's explained it. So now all this Mahat, everything is part of this Apara Prakriti, or the highest self or the lowest self, which we talked about in the 7th chapter. So so because it's lower self, a lower self can never really understand the higher self. It is almost impossible, because even up to the level of intellect, the intellect actually guides the mind through information that has come through the memory, what it has gathered and everything. But the intellect has a capacity to go even higher. And that is where, the highest, we all have that capacity and the ability to reach out to the higher parts of the intellect. And even with that, we can only go to a certain level. And that is what the shloka is trying to say, that even the Saptarishis cannot know what my higher self is, because it's way beyond the faculty of even imagination or the senses. So then one might ask, what is really the benefit? What am I really benefiting out of understanding Ishvara and his glories? So in this coming shloka, Krishna says that ultimately only whoever has that devotion for Ishvara can really understand that absolute nature. And that person at that, when he can gain that nature of the absolute, he becomes completely free of any kind of papa. And that is what he's saying here. Yamam ajam anadim cha veti loka maheshwaram asammudas martesh sarva papai pramuchate. So when we understand that absolute self or that higher self as completely as somebody who's totally unborn, beginningless. In the previous shloka, he talked about how the 7 rishis, all that has a beginning and an end, right? So here he's showing how that absolute self is unborn, beginningless, and is the absolute Lord of the entire universe. When we come to understand that purpose, that aspect, such a person can move around in the world with everybody and is not affected by anything. This word asammuda is very, very important, because he's trying to say that such a person is totally undiluted, totally, is completely, is not affected by anything at all. And for such a person, completely he's free from any kind of previous karmas that he's done, and he attains moksha. So in that sense, this is a very important verse. Only such a person who recognizes that God and that Ishvara as completely unborn and beginningless, such a person attains that highest level and is completely liberated. So the key thing we talked about before was this really begs us to develop the sense of viveka or discrimination. So Bhagavad Gita places really a very, very important, a lot of emphasis on this quality of viveka or discrimination. And we talked about before, it's that ability to differentiate between real and unreal. And for some people, this can come very easily, but for most of us, it really does not. And this is where, again, it is a use of the intellect. And for all this, ultimately, devotion is the ultimate solution. So when I hear about Ishvara's glories, my vision and understanding about that nature of Ishvara really improves. And I begin to realize that everything in this world, has a beginning and end. But Ishvara, is timeless and is so. When I see that Ishvara is present everywhere, I really develop that vivek and discrimination. So I'm able to separate what is, what is something very temporary. Like when people tell us something and I get affected by it or something, I'm able to immediately understand that this is all temporary. So this is at a very, very mundane scale. But here we are talking about viveka discrimination at the highest level, where I'm able to understand that anything which is timeless, anything which is beginningless, that is that ultimate Ishvara. So in shlokas 4 to 6, now we see the subtle manifestations. What I showed before, the gross manifestations, right? But we are people who are driven so much by our own thoughts. So at the thought level, let us see what he's trying to say in shlokas 4 to 6. So in shloka 4 and 5 actually goes into a lot of this qualities, So that same Ishvara is manifest as subtle manifestations as buddhi, jnana, sammoha, kshama, satyam, dama, shamaha, sukham, dukkham, bhavodbhavaha, bhayam cha, abhaya, evacha. So he's trying to show how buddhi, which is a capacity for us to understand subtle things, jnanam, which is a capacity for us to gather knowledge. What is knowledge? Knowledge is vidya. Vidya, in some sense, we can say is information, but it is also vidya, which is information which gets stored in one's memory, and that memory which helps that buddhi to make the right decision. So that is jnanam. Then asammoha. Asammoha is the ability for us to, look at all this information which is present in front of me and yet allow that buddhi to take the decision which is free of any kind of delusion. Delusion in the sense of, many times people may come to us and say something about somebody, but me as a person, if I'm really using my intellect well, I should be uh, able to look through this information that somebody's telling me and take a correct decision. So absence of delusion, that aspect of me which is free of any delusion. And then kshama, which is unperturbability of the mind. And we'll come to a little more in detail with all this. Satyam, Satyam is truth, but truth not just being honesty. Honesty alone is not truth. So we'll talk about that. Damaha, Shmaha, these are again sadhana chatushtaya qualities. Then sukham and dukkham, joys and sorrows, bhavaha and abhavaha. This is the aspect of existence and non-existence. And bhayam, cha, abhayam, fear and fearlessness. So these are one set of subtle expressions of that God, of Ishvara. So you see, when we start to practice a lot of these qualities, that itself is taking us closer to that Ishvara. So I have put the same thing over here, which is this, all these qualities, So buddhi is, like I said, is a capacity for us to know and understand. With this, with this, I gather a lot of information, and basically buddhi is one which takes the decision to do the things. But let's focus more on kshama. What is kshama? Can somebody give me a definition of what kshama is?
Kshama is to forgive.
Kshama is, forgiveness is definitely one of them. Here I have put this as unperturbability of the mind of one who is abused or assaulted. Very powerful, very powerful, what should I say, very powerful quality. So, Anand, when you said, yeah, go ahead, Meena.
Hariom, can we say pardon?
Pardon, yes, pardon. Somewhat similar to what Anand said, forgiveness or pardon. But can you both elaborate a little bit on what do you mean by pardon or forgiveness?
If someone does something to me, and then it's hurting, or it affects me, and even after knowing that he affected, whether by intention or without intention, so to completely forgive the whole thing, and then
Right.
I mean, forgive the person and forgive the act.
Right.
So that's the more deeper meaning of the kshama.
Correct. Correct. You're right. So, yeah. Anything more to add, Meena?
we can say, I mean, whatever it comes to your mind, and whether it is negative for you or whatever it is, just take this in one ear and leave it off in the other ear, and then just forgive them,
Right.
and
Yeah.
things will go good.
But one of the most difficult things to practice, though, isn't it?
We have to try to.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is not, but sometimes, yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really, I mean, this is one of the things that in one of the chapters of self-unfoldment, I remember when we were talking about mind, so this chapter,
After we keep reading so much and what Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, we can definitely feel the difference on us, for sure,
yes,
100%. Maybe 1%, maybe 0.5%, but that's okay. But we all feel the difference. That's for sure.
right. Swami Tejomananda actually quotes somebody, a particular quote which he read and which I thought really hits the nail on the head. He says, the definition of forgiveness is renouncing your right to hate someone. I'm completely renouncing that right to hate anybody. I'm just completely giving up, renouncing it. So you renounce your right to hate the person who has hurt you. That is kshama, you know. It's just so powerful. It means that automatically you love everyone, even the person, who may have said, and he gives this beautiful example of a very simple example. It's like, when your son or daughter was like 6 months old or something, and it's just starting to play around and you're holding the child and the child pulls your hair,
Mhm.
are you going to ask the child to say, Mama, I'm sorry that I pulled your hair or anything? The child doesn't even know. And you also don't care about it at that point in time. It just doesn't bother you at all,
There's
And
a bhajan, there's a bhajan that says, Shama karo, kripa karo. No,
right, correct,
it's a very, very powerful word, Shama karo.
exactly. So that's basically what is really kshama is. Kshama is that unperturbability of the mind of one who's abused. So constantly, constantly this mind is really calm, and it takes in work. I mean, whatever this aspect of praise or I guess criticism in an even way. Now, what is satyam? How do we understand what satyam is?
Truth.
It is truth, but uh, how can we elaborate that a little more?
It's being the truth and honest
Truth, honesty, exactly,
and yeah, honesty. Yeah.
right. But it is also this aspect, like, if I say that I always speak the truth, that truth which is the same no matter I tell it to Anant or I tell it to Jayashri or I tell it to Meena, it is exactly the same. I don't try to color it for the sake of somebody else. That is the absolute truth. And that is what here, it's defined, it's an utterance regarding what one has seen, heard, or communicated as such. As such, nothing different. And this is again a quality, which can improve over a period of time. In the beginning, we may say things only because we want to please others. Of course, there is a difference here which we have to be mindful of. Sometimes we may say something uh, which may not necessarily be the truth, but it is necessary to be tell that way in order to prevent some major catastrophe from happening or something. Like I always remember this one story. So there is this Mahatma who's sitting and meditating, and there is this girl who's trying to escape. So, she comes and she tells the Mahatma, please don't see there's somebody chasing me. Please don't tell this person which path I'm taking. So she, takes a particular path and goes, runs. And then there's this guy chasing, and who comes and asks the Mahatma, where did you see this girl? And so the Mahatma may not necessarily say, no, I did not see the girl, but he may probably point saying that, please go the other way or something like that, So I'm just trying to make the difference here, but Satyam is basically trying to be truthful to the best of our own possibility. And it's a quality, like I said, it improves even within our own self about how we communicate things. So Dhamma and Shama, like we talked, they are the sadhana chatushkaya qualities. Dhamma is the ability to have control over the external environment, not allowing the external environment to influence us. Whereas Shama is where I'm not using my own mind to influence myself. So control of the mind when I'm in an environment outside. Sukham and dukkham are happiness and sorrow, bhavaha, birth and death or existence. So being beyond that, and bhayam and abhayam, as it says, this absence of complete fear.
Hari Om, can you explain what is asamoha?
Asamoha is, the ability, like it says here, to wait through See, moha means, the word moha means delusion. Delusion, like for example, in our own mind, because of previous experiences, I'm just going to use this example, Meena, so hope you don't mind. Like suppose, somebody had told me that, Meena is extremely intelligent, bright, and everything, okay? So I develop a certain sense of who Meena is, okay? And then Meena comes and tells me something which I'm so convinced that you are so brilliant and everything, that maybe you told me something which actually requires my mind to think a little more before I can give an answer or whatever. So my mind is now deluded with a certain impression of you, and through which I try to give an answer. So asammoha is the ability that I will still give a certain expression to the best of my own ability without allowing my mind to be clouded or influenced. So maybe the word influence is a better word here. So moha, asammoha is the ability to be completely not influenced by anything or everything that is going on. Like, for example, even now, I'll say this. I mean, in US just last week, with the change in the Democratic nominee, for example, there is so much amount of delusion that people have to change within themselves, in order to make the right decision or whatever, right? We get so hung up with things around us and we allow that to influence us. So asammoha is the ability to remain uninfluenced by things.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
So continuing in shloka number 5, he continues with some more of these subtle expressions of Ishvara. And that is these expressions of ahimsa, which is non-injury, equanimity, which is samataha, samam, and tushtihi is contentment, tapaha, austerity or tapas, right? Danam, charity, yashaha, fame, ayashaha, infamous, infame. Bhavanti bhavaha bhutanam matta eva pratak vidaha. So again, look at the way he's trying to show this, I mean, how Krishna is explaining about his own expressions after expressing all the gross expressions. So here I have mentioned this. So ahimsa is actually not really cruel, showing non-cruelty in a gross form by hitting or somebody, but it goes all the way to at the thought level. So in a very simple-minded, some people may say, so does that mean that I should not punish a child because I'm practicing ahimsa? Well, that is not true. If you have to punish your child, not necessarily by physically beating or anything like that, but if you have to pat the child on the head a little bit to show that hey, listen up, so that is also ahimsa, because you're trying to do a good thing to the child. So ahimsa is non-cruelty at the thought level, that I consider everyone as being part of myself. So samatha, again, equanimity or even-mindedness. In some sense, it's kind of related to what we talked about, which is kshama, So samatha means being equanimous, the equanimity of mind in the midst of a pair of opposites. So it doesn't, like right now in Kerala, it's raining like crazy. So how do you still maintain, how do you try to maintain that after all, this is just weather, it will pass. So that is samatha. Tushti is satisfaction. I'm, being completely satisfied with whatever comes to me. That is tushti. Tapaha is, of course, disciplining the body through control. That doesn't mean that, just totally denying ourselves what the body needs. So that is tapaha. Dhanam is the distribution of wealth, and Taittiriya Upanishad, there is a lot of very good tips, which at some point maybe we will discuss it. We have discussed it before when I was there, when we did Abhinata classes, about this aspect of Dhanam, and when we did Sadhana, Panchakam, and Bhaj Govindam, for example. And Yashaha and Ayashaha is this ability to, be in control when we are in a position of influence. How do I maintain myself? How do I not allow that fame, or for that matter, if somebody were to pull me down, how am I able to hold all this? So all these are the qualities which Ishvara is trying to say are also my qualities. So now, having expressed all the subtle expressions, any questions on those six, or not just six, the many, many qualities? And you will see all these qualities will come again, like in the 17th chapter, for example. Then 13th chapter also, we have the 20 qualities which will come up. We'll talk about it again. But any question? Yeah.
Yeah, I came across this regarding the Satyam. This is from the Upanishads. Says it goes like Satyam bhuyat, priyam bhuyat, na bhuyat Satyam apriyam. So the meaning goes like you say the truth, say what is pleasant, never tell what is truthful but unpleasant.
Okay. Never say something which is unpleasant. Yeah. Very nice. So now moving on to shloka number 6, he now starts to discuss about Ishvara's manifest, or the visible expressions. So he starts to first express about all the great sages and the 14 individuals which are actually called as Manus. So he says, Krishna actually will assert in the shloka about how all these sages and Manus, who are the creators of all the living beings and the inert beings, both living and non-living, they were created by Ishvara through his mind. So in Srimad Bhagavatam, actually, where the aspect of creation is discussed, Ishvara first created Lord Brahma, and then he entrusts the responsibility of creating this universe to his four mind-born sons, who's Sanaka, Sanandana, Sanatana, and Sanat Kumara. So when he asks them to populate the world, they refuse because they do not want to get entangled in the worldly pursuits. So they take a vow of celibacy and they roam the world constantly contemplating upon Ishvara. So then what happened is Lord Brahma created the Saptarishis, or the seven great sages, Bhrigu, Marichi, all of them, which I had put even earlier. So he then created Manu, who was then entrusted with further procreation and establishment of the moral code, which many of you know is the Manusmriti. Manusmriti is really the policy. Manu was the first policy maker, if you wish, for the Manushas. So we have the 14 Manus, which corresponds to the 14 Manvantras, of the periods of the Manus. So all this is what, in shloka number 6, he says, Maharshaya sapta purve chatvaro manavas tatha madbhava manasa jataha yesham loka ima rajaha. So the seven great rishis, again, were the creation of Ishvara. The ancient four sages, Chatvara, Manava, and also the Manus. And they possessed, like he said, having been given the powers from Ishvara, born from his mind. From these really have come all the creatures. Loke ima prajaha. All these creatures have come basically from that aspect of Manus. So this 4, 5, 6, if you want to look at these shlokas, 4 and you have to look at this at the level of adhyatmic, at the level of the subtle expressions. We saw all those 28 qualities which was given in shlokas 4 and 5. But then here it is at the Adi Devik quality, at the level of Adi Devik. So, we always, when we say Om Sahana Bhavatu, right, we say Shanti for 3 times. At the adhyatmic level, at the level of the mind, at the level of Adi Devik, which is at the level of the Devas who are responsible for the creation of the gross world, and finally Adi Bhautik, which is at the level of all the bhutas of the world. So that is what he's saying in 6 is basically the entire creation of the world have come about from these great rishis, the sages, and the Manus. And they were all kind of entrusted with the power of creation. So now in this shloka here, in 7 shlokas, he tries to now explain about more on those lines. Etam vibhutim yogam cha mamayo veti tattvataha so vikampena yogena yujyate natra samshaya. So all these subtle expressions, all these gross expressions, these manifestations, etam vibhutim, these manifestations of my being and yoga are all power of mind, and only he who knows them in truth, again in Satyam, where a mind has been so purified, has been made so subtle, saha avikampena yogena, he becomes established, there's no doubt about it. Again, another shloka trying to say that to attain that highest moksha, one needs to have the ability to understand these manifestations of Ishvara, which is being manifested in the gross form and in these subtle form. So avikampena yogena, very, very powerful word. And here it says, that yoga which is completely free of all disturbances. There's in one of the Upanishads, I'll try to find that particular shlokas from this particular Upanishad, which talks about avikampena, that aspect of the mind, which can lead to developing that yoga in the mind. So I think my throat can handle only so much. Unfortunately, I think I'm going to stop at this point. We will, next week, we will start the word avikampena, and we'll get into more on the shlokas 8 and beyond. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayah, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kasyat dukha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Namudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namah. Hari Om. Thank you. I'm going to stop the this, but I want to